10 of Android, and it's been quite some time that we started off with Android programming course, and it's been a while. And since we don't do these trainings back to back, we conduct one batch every 3 to 4 months. So this is batch number 10. So I welcome you all for it. And the agenda for the next 2 months is to quickly, the agenda for the next 2 hours is to quickly discuss what is it we will be covering in the next 2 months, and to understand what does it take to become an Android developer. So I want this session to be kind of engaging in nature, free-flowing with discussions. So feel free to stop me, interject, ask me questions, air your doubts, air your queries at any point in time. So let's begin. Well, the course name that we have given, as is the history with our other courses as well, is called Android Foundation Course. So the idea is to train you in Android with very strong fundamentals, so that you and I should be able to build independently and an application from scratch and be able to port it to the Play Store. So that's the basic aim at the highest level of this Android Foundation course, where we should be able to build any application, whatever be the requirements per se, from literally paper to full-fledged development and deployment into the Play Store, and have it be available for anybody to be able to access. So that's the aim of this program. Well, before we get to actually how we are going to do it and how we are going to accomplish, what is it we cover, and so on and so forth, let's start a discussion together. Well, if you want to understand, like some of us might be deliberating on, should I do Android or not? Is this the right time for me? Is it important at all? How is it in the industry? Is it relevant? What kind of jobs are available on Android development? So why should I seek this over something else maybe? So I want to put to rest all those kind of queries that you may have, so that you have a certainty. Yes, this is right for me, or at the end of 2 hours, yes, I am 100% sure this is not for me. Either which ways, we need to have clarity in our thought process so that we can understand whether we want to do this or not. So, which is why, let's start with a brief discussion of understanding what is Android today. When I started Android training in 2008, 2009, we started way early actually, just when Android was in the market, so to say. That was the first couple of batches that I did. At that point in time, Android was very new. So I had to really ask people, have you heard of Android? All right. So today I have to ask the ulta question. Is there any soul in the world who has not heard of Android? Then mostly he is staying in Amazonian forest or something like that. Just kidding. So we know what Android is, without a doubt. But do we really know what Android is the question. So what I mean to say is, let's pose to ourselves a simple question, so that we are clear about what Android is in the first place. So let me ask you, what is Android? And before you answer, just so that we can all appreciate this so-called Android, because it's been there for a while now, let us try to understand, where is Android used today? Okay, let's look at some statistics. Then we'll come back to answering what is Android all about. So tell me, obviously, where is it that we have seen Android is prevalent in, is where? Mobile systems, mobile phones, obviously, no doubts about it. Give me some stats. How many mobile phones are Android enabled? Do you know? Yeah, so roughly of the entire market, if you look at it, 87.5%, right? 87.5% of the what phone market? Smartphone market. No, 87% of the entire smartphone market is cordoned off by Android. I got that. But how many phones? Just give me an andaj number. 200 million. So many. Only into 10 men. So it's 2000 million, which basically means right now where is Android today? It is available in 2 billion Android devices. Can you beat that? We are 7 billion people, and there are 2 billion mobile phones which are just Android enabled, right? And every day 1.5 million Android phones get activated. Every day 1.5 million is getting added on. I mean, I'm sure this is giving tight competition to our population of India, you see. So it's unbelievable with the way it is galloping on a daily basis. Bottom line, Where is Android today? Is that 2 billion plus smartphones are enabled on Android. You have 1.5 million activations every day. But we know that Android is not used only for smartphones, isn't it? Where else is Android being used today? You have smart TVs, isn't it? So clearly where is it? Is in smartphones, no doubts about it. And you have smart TVs and Android what? Yes, Android Wear, that is nothing but your watches, etc. Right? And then what is the three-wheeler that we take everywhere? Auto, man, auto. Android Auto, but not that auto. Android Automobile, isn't it? So you have even companies like Mahindra and Suzuki trying to adopt Android Auto for their automobiles entertainment systems, isn't it? So Android Auto, Android Wear, and then what else? Things like Glass, isn't it? So it's also a part of something like Wear, Google Glass, right? And then where else? In your, yes. So you have virtual reality headsets which are powered by Android. Of course, akin to it is also AR, Augmented Reality as it's called, isn't it? I'm sure you would have seen the latest Android videos where you have a mobile phone and students are looking into the mobile phone and what they are seeing are different creatures, different chemistry experiments happening on the table, right? You know augmented reality, isn't it? You have a table and you use the phone to see through into the table is there, but on top of it there are animations and different characters which are superimposed on the real world, and you can interact with it. It's amazing, especially for teaching, especially at school. Anyway, so AR, so bottom line, if you notice now, that is Android being used in only smartphone as it was originally coined? Absolutely not. It is increasing its portfolio, so to say, in that it is being used increasingly in all kinds of embedded devices, isn't it? If you notice what is common and centric to all of this are that they are all based on embedded devices. You now have Google Mini Home, right? Or the home automation system where you have a speaker with microphones which can listen to you and it can interact with the backing Google servers, and it can listen to your voice and then query up and answer questions in real time for you, right? All of these are today Android backed, isn't it? So just a smartphone are these, but increasingly in these as well, you are now Android is increasing its portfolio, isn't it? So the question comes, we understand that this is where Android is, and just from historical point of view, when was Android released to the world? 2000? So 6, 7, yeah, no doubts about it. 2005, the company got created, and the company originally was created by who? A person called Andy Rubin, right? Andy Rubin, and he made this company with his co-founder, and of course, who bought this company is your Google. And of course, Android, and it's actually, Android is not just as a robot, it has his name only in it, Andy Royd, like that, you see. So anyway, so Android was coined and released to the world in about 2007. That same time when what was released, iPhone was released, right? So when iPhone was released, it kind of shook up the world and the smartphone and the phone telecom market, isn't it? We want to talk a little bit about it historically to understand what is the importance of Android and why it is where it exists today. So roughly in about 2007, which basically means it has been in the world only for a decade, isn't it? In just one decade, can you believe that? It has gone from zero to hero, you know, because there were 0 people using Android 10 years ago. Today there are 2 billion people using Android today, and it is only increasing. In fact, in the Android world, we have a saying which is, there are only 2 kinds of people today, one who uses an Android device and one who will be using an Android device, which basically means the entire world will be using Android devices and now or in the future. Bottom line, how is it possible that in this so-called short span of 10 years, Android reached where it is, isn't it? So we have a kind of an inkling on where. There are many other stats, I will not bore you with it, but these numbers are good enough for us to understand. 87.5% of the entire smartphone market across the world is taken up by Android. One more stat which I was just looking up before I started the session. There are only about 4,000 devices, 4,000 plus smartphones that you can buy on Android. I mean, really, it is getting more difficult to choose an Android mobile phone in comparison with choosing a partner for life. You see, I mean, you don't 4,000 options. If you go to Sangeeta or Universal, forget it, right? And you say, I don't want the best Android phone or whatever Android phone within a price range, then forget it. He's going to throw some 200 phones at you, right? Bottom line, there are unbelievable choices as well. So, keeping all of these things in mind, we want to really understand what is Android. So, I want to hear from you. What do you think is Android? Android is OS? Okay, very good. Some of you say Android is OS. All right, tell me more. What comes to your mind the moment you think of an Android? Maybe the moment you think of an Android, what comes to your mind is smartphones, isn't it? The smartphones come to your mind. The physical hardware comes to your mind, right? Like many of you, the moment you hear of Android, you will think of, I don't know, Samsung Note 8 or Note 7 burning up, right? Or you are thinking about whatever is LG or Google Nexus phones that you have. Okay, what else is Android? So let me ask you again, is it the smartphone or is it an OS? It's a platform. Okay, all right. So what is it you can do and create, and that comes to our mind or create? Apps, applications, obviously. All right, what else? What else is Android? Anything else that comes to your mind? Right? So obviously all of these things will also come to our mind. So today it is actually kind of a little difficult to explain what Android is. It's like, everybody knows Android, but nobody knows what Android is really. If you simply ask him, because one person will say smartphone, another person will say application, another person will say OS, another person will say libraries, another person will say framework, another person will say platform, another person will say, no, have you not seen my TV? Another person will say car. So what is Android is actually a complex definition to come up with in simple terms. So we're going to come to that in short bit, but you have already said all these things. Now, before we come to explain what Android is all about and why we would want to learn about it and how does this course is going to help us in doing so and what is the end goal that we can reach, we want to understand a little bit of our history, because we know where Android is today, but how did it happen so in the last 10 years and why? Some high level understanding if we have as to why Android is where it is today, we will have a better insight into what Android is all about, right? So quickly, let's understand the history. Everybody knows this history, and it's a no-brainer because it's just happened in the last 10 years and we've all seen it, isn't it? So prior to 10 years, you had mobile phones, obviously, except that there was no Android, there was no iPhone, and primarily the telecom market was very different to the kind of market that you see now. So I want us to understand briefly as to what was the kind of picture then. First of all, you primarily had phones which you could buy, but they were not called smartphones. What were they called? Feature phones, isn't it? So we know this. So earlier to 2007, it's not that we didn't have smartphones, we did, but the options were very less in number. So most of the phones that were available were called feature phones, right? So just as a very quick versus game, let's try to understand what is the difference between feature phone and smartphone. Today, you have to really search for buying a feature phone, isn't it? Because most of the phones that you get are smartphones. Having said that, earlier on, 10 years ago, it was exactly the opposite. All the phones that you could buy were from Samsung or Motorola, or of course the one big Hadug company, the big company which is now underground is Nokia. Yes, so Nokia, you are only feature phones, isn't it? 1100 with tube light or torch and with I don't know, whatever cutter and this and that. So now very quickly, we all know this, so let's put it together quickly. Tell me what is the main differences between feature phones and smartphones. Why are feature phones called feature phones in the first place? You cannot access, you cannot add extra features to it. Very good. Extra applications to it. Very good. So mainly feature phones are called feature phones is because when you buy the phone, you decide to buy the phone or not based on its features, and the features are fixed. It is unchanging, right? You cannot add extra features to it. You can't make it do other things that it could not do when you bought it, isn't it? So that's why they are called feature phones. At the time of buying, you have to decide how much memory you want, and that time you would have remembered, right? So you would get phones which said 300 contact memory, right? Which means 300 contacts you could store, and other people were, you know, 300 ಇದೆ, ನನ್ನ ಹತ್ರ 100 ಕಣೋ, right? So 100 contact, 200 contact, 3000, one phone came, 3000 contact. People went bonkers, right? 3000 contacts, ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಎಲ್ಲರದು ನಂಬರ್ ಇಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹಾಕೋ, right? So clearly that's the set of features, isn't it? And then of course you had some amount of RAM, you had color screen or not, that was a feature, color screen or not, you know. And I remember I bought a phone called Motorola A768i way back in 2006, or 2005, I don't remember right now, and that had touch screen, you see, and it was a capacitive screen, horrible, which basically means if you touch something and all would get touched, okay, or everything would get touched or nothing would get touched, okay. It was completely insensitive, and there was a stylus and you could actually point things, and I had become a hero in the company because nobody had such a phone, you see. And I remember that managers and leads and of other teams would come and say, it seems you have a very, very nice phone, I want to see it, right? And it had a flip and all that, and it was unbelievable, totally impractical, but I made a big name for myself there. Bottom line, that's the kind of world which was there in feature phones, isn't it? So you had a set of features and you couldn't add anything to it. Also, all these feature phones mainly were, I mean, what is a phone? Typically you have a hardware and you have a processor in the hardware. Obviously to manage that processor and hardware you need an OS, isn't it? So the OSs that were there in feature phones were abysmally insignificant or incapable of doing anything, isn't it? Very low powered operating systems. So let's contrast it to smartphones. First of all, the hallmark of smartphones is what? Touchscreen, right? Earlier you had all the keypad and whatnot, you had physical buttons, and obviously iPhone eradicated that in one sweep by introducing the the touchscreen, isn't it? So you have mainly resistive touchscreens, isn't it? Of course things have changed a lot over the years, but these so-called resistive touchscreens give you the ability to have your touch be recognized over thousands of different points, right? So few 100,000 points you can touch and it recognizes the touch. It's unbelievable, unlike the capacitive screens which were there a priori. Having said that, so first thing is that smartphones are touch screen enabled, right? Give me all the other things. Almost all touch screens, all smartphones are what? You can update it, okay, you can change, add some RAM, etc. Okay, what else? Good applications, okay, we have applications, all right. So tell me what else is there in a smartphone? Updatable, upgradable, okay, what else? What else? I got that. What else? Sensors, okay, you have sensors. I mean, come on, the most basic thing is one is touch screen and it is connected to internet enabled, isn't it? Or internet ready or internet connected, right? Internet enabled or internet ready. Now, some of the feature phones actually came with browsers, so you could actually connect to the internet, but they were horrible, super slow, and even the networks were pretty bad at that time. So you basically could not ever use the internet, right? But the hallmark of smartphones is they are always connected to the internet. And today you have our country already mooting for 5G, isn't it? Okay, 4G. I mean, I don't know about you, I don't have 4G, okay? And now people are already talking about 5G and the entire infrastructure being 5G enabled, super fast wireless internet, isn't it? Having said that, but also Jio has come and it has really, thankfully, Jio has come and and induced fresh breath, and we are all getting amazing packs of data and whatnot. Having said that, all smartphones are smart because they are internet connected, and of course the internet is like, I mean, it's a cloud, man. It has all kinds of intelligence and knowledge. And imagine if there was, they say in our yogic folklore in India that there is a yogic cloud, okay? And if at all a person does dhyan and he reaches a higher level of evolution, what he can connect is to that so-called yogic cloud. And in this yogic cloud, there is knowledge and information about everything and everyone, okay? And it's called Akashic Records. I really love the name. It's so fancy, sounds like a 2017 lingo, but except that it was made, a couple of thousand years ago. It's called Akashic Records. So supposedly a yogi can tap into these Akashic Records and download the knowledge. I mean, think about it. The amount of knowledge I and you have is very limited to our brain capacity, isn't it? But imagine if we were all connected to this so-called cloud. From there we could download any kind of data that we want. Your data goes to cloud, from there it comes to me. Life would be so simple, man. Imagine training. All I have to do is upload to cloud and download in your brain. Now, even though that was all beautiful as a story, that's the exact truth that we have today, isn't it? The key thing about a smartphone is that it is internet connected, and communication between internet and the phone happens seamlessly, synchronously and asynchronously, isn't it? You have sensors. Name me some of the sensors which are there. Proximity sensors, proximity accelerometer, gyroscopes, right? You have fingerprint scanners, and today, you would have read the article that was released yesterday. In 2018, apparently none of the smartphones will have touch screen, because it will all be face ID, right? That iPhone has released. Apparently, it's all gonna take over the entire smartphone across the smartphone vendors. Anyway, gyroscope, and then barometers, right? Barometer, pressure gauges, your XY axis rotational identification for accelerometer, gyroscope, in proximity sensors. Then what else? You have magnetometers. It is unbelievable, right? How much you can literally embed into a small device, right? Photo sensors, obviously CCDs and whatnot, which brings us to a very important point. That is, what is one of the most used thing of the smartphone is camera. Take a guess as to the number of times an Android person touches his phone today. On an average, 2 billion people are using it, isn't it? Actually, 2 billion people are not using. 2 billion devices are there. More than 1.5 billion people are using it. But anyway, so give me an andaj, average number of times an Android person touches his Android phone. Take a guess. 600 times. I don't know where that 6 came from, but good. 100,000. 100,000 is too much, man. Every day. Every day. No. And this is actually calculated. This is not a fictitious figure. It is some 2,695 times. You see? On an average. Because you might text more, man. And I don't. So we average it out. Okay? Just kidding. So approximately 2,600 times we touch it on a daily basis. Unbelievable, isn't it? So one of the hallmark of mobile phones today is the capability of the camera, right? I mean, gone are the days where you would lug around big cameras with you, with attaching lenses and boxes and bags for it and whatnot, isn't it? Of course, today people do it for show, but I mean, our professionals do it because they want higher quality images. But for the most common people like you and me, clearly a mobile phone camera is more than enough, isn't it? That too, we have what lenses today? All in your Samsung S8 Edge Plus or whatever else. Huh? Yeah, Carl G is fine, but it's mainly what lens? Dual lens, man. Dual lens, isn't it? You have two lenses, and you have optical stabilization, movement stabilization, right? And it's unbelievable, the capability of these cameras today. Of course, what else are there are your things like speakers, and that too, you have speakers across the board, stereo speakers. You have amazing microphones which can capture all kinds of audio, isn't it? And then, importantly, what else is there? RAM. Let's look at the physical thing. You have a super capable processors, very capable, fully functional OSs, right? Which was not the case in the feature phone at all. You have RAM, which is probably giving your laptop a run for the money, isn't it? So you have 3 GB RAM phones, 4 GB RAM phones, where our machines might still have only 2 GB or 4 GB. So it's unbelievable. The processor speeds have clocked unbelievable rates. Which is the most popular processor of 2017 in smartphone? Snapdragon 835, right? At least in the flagship devices, right? 835 is the one which is unbelievably fast, and you have dual core, quad core, octa core, right? Exynos processor, AMD processors, and so on and so forth. Which is the number one company that makes your smartphone chips? Qualcomm. And second is? Not MediaTek, although that's a good answer. No, Samsung. Can you believe that? Companies which were not even considered to be capable in building mobile chips, or chips in general, are today number one. I want to talk about that in a minute, right? So all of these things are obviously what makes the smartphone smart. But the key thing was, as you already suggested, the most important functionality of a smartphone is the fact, yes, they are upgradable, and today you have Motorola devices where you can attach one camera, attach one this one, attach one that one, etc., isn't it? So it's definitely it is upgradable, but the most important thing that makes a smartphone smart is the apps, isn't it? So they are all these smartphones are connected to a centralized cloud, Play Store, App Store, whatever you call it, right? And from where we can easily download the apps and have it be installed. And why is that? So the most important part of the smartphone as to why it is called a smartphone is because of the availability of apps. And why so? It's mainly because apps are pieces of programs that you can install on the system, and they can use all of these hardware and software that are available and to give us different capabilities, isn't it? And of course you have your GPS, right? One of the big things about smartphone is you can always know where it is physically present, right? So clearly apps can utilize all of these features now and give us intelligence. Not only that, why are smartphones called smart? What is increasingly in the uptrend between in the last 2 years and increasingly so in the next few years? What is it we will see as capabilities of smartphones? They are all backed by what? Sorry? Artificial intelligence and Janaga? What, man? Yeah, no doubts about it, but what do you call it? As smart assistants, right? So you have your Cortana and you have your Alexas and you have your Google, what do you call it? Google Assistants, right? And then you have, of course, your Bixby of Samsung and so on and so forth, right? So they're all backed by smart assistants, right? So the smart assistants are backed by AI, right? Most of them, which is why we are increasingly getting more power, more intelligence, more smartness in a phone in comparison with anything else. And why is it that all these are being put into a smartphone and not to a laptop? No brainer. What is it that makes a smartphone the hardware to embed all these sensors and all these apps into is because they are portable. They are always with us. Sometimes we are not there, but smartphone is there, right? I mean, literally to speak, smartphone, where we go, the smartphone goes, which is the reason why it makes sense that smartphone is where the hardware increases, right? Today we say that the desktops are the dying trend, right? The desktops are dying, and what is the current age desktop is nothing but your smartphone. All computing power is embedded into the phone. We know this. Again, as I said, we're just going to discuss history for the next 15 minutes to understand how Android evolved. Having said that, so all these are what makes a smartphone smart, but most importantly the apps. The beauty is who controls the apps is the customer, isn't it? And who develops the app, the beauty is not one company or one vendor, but any developer in the world, isn't it? So literally to speak, smartphones, especially iPhone and Android, have democratized the development market, right? We want to talk about that for a minute. So just for the sake of discussion, we want to see what happened prior to the 2007 era. First and foremost, the choices that were available for us mostly were only feature-based phones. We had none of these things, obviously. The second thing is, and of course, we have forgot to add, you can have rich video players, and of course, today your smartphones are replacing your consoles for gaming, isn't it? So all entertainment and whatnot. Bottom line, earlier to 2007, if you see the telecom market, there are primarily a number of players in a telecom market. Obviously, how many players are? 4 players. What are the four players who are there in the telecom market? Obviously, in the telecom market, who are the players who are involved? Yeah, the first you have the telecom vendor, isn't it? The telecom vendor, that is nothing but your Reliance Jio or Airtel, the ones who actually buy the airwave space and the spectrum from the government, and they set up the infrastructure. So they set up the infrastructure with all your pillars, or what do you call it? Antennas, or what do you call it? Yes, towers and so on and so forth, right? So that's the first aspect, the telecom vendors. How much investment do these telecom vendors invest? Is it in small number or huge number? Huge. It is huge because it's a pan-geographical set of things that will be put in. Billions of dollars are invested, no doubts about it. Then, who else is there? In the telecom market, who are the other players? Service providers, right? So you have the service providers and the service provider. So okay, let's classify both of these two together, the telecom vendor with your service provider, right? So usually the service providers works in conjunction with the telecom vendors, right? Or the service providers who give you the circles to log into and whatnot. Then apart from that, in the telecom market, somebody should make what? Hardware, right? So what do we call them? OEMs, right? Original equipment manufacturers or makers. Original equipment manufacturers are nothing but the companies who make the devices. That's where your Samsung and Motorola and LG and Apple, etc. come up, isn't it? Then who else is there? Yes, you have developers for sure. And finally, the most important part, user, we, right? I and you. So the end user. Now, tell me this, who is the one who foots the bill? Who is the one who pays for anything and everything? Is the user, isn't it? So if user is the consumer, he is the main guy who is footing the bill and through whom all these other guys are making the money. Who should ideally be in control of the entire marketplace and who should dictate what should happen in the marketplace ideally is the user, isn't it? But earlier to 2007, in the feature phone market world, the user did not control anything. Who controlled the roost mainly was the service provider, right? Typically, the OEM guys had a problem because not only they had to make the hardware, they also had to build your OS. And OS building is a very complex affair. It's not very easy to build OS, which is the reason why these companies, when they built hardware, they actually built very good hardware. So Nokia built very good hardware, but they could not ever capably build the OS. So because they had to do two things, what suffered was OS. So that is why all our devices were underpowered in terms of OS capabilities, right? Which is why application development became even more a chore. And all these OEM guys, they mixed with your telecom vendors, formed a coterie, and they would expose certain set of APIs, for developers. I remember distinctly in 2006, we had approached Airtel, and what we wanted to build, I and a couple of my friends, was a triangulation app to help ladies and people in general know beam out the location of where they are. You see, this was prior to the smartphone world, smartphone era. Now it's very easy to build an app using your iPhone or Android because you have GPS there. Back then the feature phones did not have GPS. So the only way you could find out the location of an individual was to triangulate the position by using the network towers, right? So we had made a proposal and we wanted to build an app and we wanted to give it and we had a big idea. It was a big business plan. I remember even to go to Airtel to talk to the respective person, it took some 10 meetings because they made us run around everywhere. And finally they said, you are too young, you can't do anything, get lost. Okay? So that was the kind of industry at that point in time. These guys controlled the roost, literally to speak. And even, you remember, even to get to an horoscope of the day, joke of the day, you have to pay 1 rupee, 2 rupee, etc. So literally, the service providers formed a coterie with the developers. Only a few companies, in India one company became very big. Which company became really big by joining hands with Airtel? You don't know? On mobile, you have not heard? Almost all the things, your news, your joke, your horoscope, your games, all those things were made by this on mobile company, right? And they made a killing. But you and me could not become developers and build applications, right? So which basically means everything was controlled mainly by the service provider guy. And he controlled the data, how much data is available, he controlled the voice, he controlled the amount that we need to pay, and it was unbelievably a bad market. Now, what happened when iPhone came up into picture? Suddenly, it democratized a lot of things. Why? Because suddenly, who could become the developers? Anybody could become the developers because all the phones were connected to this so-called app store, isn't it? And anybody could build the apps and the users could download, and not only that, the developer could also charge a fee, which means suddenly it became a new type of revenue for the developers. So obviously, I don't know if you remember, in 2007 and 2008, Java was on a downtrend, actually to speak, across the world. Every 10 years this happens to Java, and ever since its inception, there is usually a phase that it goes through where some other thing becomes hot and people start talking about, oh my God, Java is dying. So it has never died and it is not going to as well. But having said that, today, Boost, Python, is, people are talking Python is going to be the new Java killer and whatnot. And at no point in time, any of the languages have died, including your C, C++, which is still in use today. Having said that, if you remember the 2007, the Java was kind of going down, and what gave a major flip to Java ecosystem, a shot in the arm, so to say, was the inception and creation and release of Android. Because what was the primary programming language in which you could build apps for Android is Java. So it became a huge thing because anybody could sit and develop applications sitting at home, put it on the Play Store, and users who download it can either pay them for royalty, a revenue, an ongoing fee, one-time fee, or you could simply make money from the ads that are embedded within it, isn't it? It's unbelievable. All this is history we know, and millions of developers have earned billions of dollars over the last decade, and that democratized the thing. And suddenly, what happened now? Look at Reliance Jio, right, as to how disruptive they have become. Because why was it that these service providers controlled the market? Is because they controlled voice. And the major use of the phone was voice, isn't it? To make the calls, to send the SMSs, and these guys control that. But suddenly with these smartphones, they are connected to the internet, you could now use VoIP, isn't it? Do you make phone calls to USA anymore? For all your relatives who are there in the US? No way, man. WhatsApp muddy, isn't it? Or Skype muddy or something to that effect. Basically we use VoIP. So suddenly voice started going not on the voice network but on the data network. And that's what Jio has embraced, isn't it? In Jio, there is no voice, there is no separate voice network. Even the voice goes over internet, right? Over the data network itself. So, bottom line, suddenly you started getting new service providers. Service providers which never even existed a priori, isn't it? Tata came into India, and Reliance and Airtel became big, and so on and so forth, right? And your Hooch became Vodafone and whatnot. You know the story, right? And suddenly, what happened, especially with the advent of Android? What did Android guys do? They said, look, we will give you free OS. Why do you want to worry? They went to the OEMs and they said, we will give you free OS. You focus only on hardware. We will make the world's best smartphone OS for you. And all you need to do is you need to install it. And how much does it cost? I mean, it's like you saw the news yesterday, right? Tata Teleservices. Tata Teleservices was sold to Airtel. You know, for what biggest sum? You did not see the news? Tata Teleservices, you know, Tata Teleservices is one of those Tata wings which is into telecom space, which has been a complete flop and complete loss-making unit for the last 10 years, right? And it has about 5% of market share of Indian circles. But anyway, yesterday Tata Teleservices was sold to Airtel. So Airtel bought it. I'm sure in last 2 months ago you saw that Vodafone and Idea merged. When Vodafone and Idea merged, they became the biggest network vendor and the service provider in India. But now, because Airtel and Tata Teleservices are merging, it's becoming number one, right? In terms of its number of users and the circles that it plays. Having said that, I wanted to ask you the price. What is the price that they sold for? You don't know? Tata Teleservices, it controls 5% of the market. They have about 40 million users, and they have about I forget the exact number, some 2 million towers, and they have some gigahertz band and all that. They were sold for 0 rupees. Yes. Entire Tata Teleservices was given to Airtel free of cost. Literally, I'm telling you, that's why it's big news. Apparently only to me. Just kidding. Okay. So it's big news because, I mean, it's a free merger, right? But of course, it's not really free. Nothing is free in this world. Airtel is supposed to pay back some loans that Tata Teleservices has to the tune of a couple of thousand crores, right? So it's not really free, but it is still free. It's still as free as it can get in this business. Having said that, new OEMs came, right? And think about it. Until your Android came up into picture, the kind of OEMs who were making the hardware were only a few. Nokia, Motorola, Samsung was a distant fourth or fifth, right? LG, just 5 or 6 who were the hardware makers, phone makers. You know why? Because they also had to make OS. And Nokia had Symbian OS. They would pay royalty fees for others to use it. And it was unbelievable for any developer to build apps because they were entrenched in low-level APIs, and it was very difficult. So it was an impossible affair. But suddenly, because Android gave free OS, suddenly newer companies could make hardware now. And that too, China being the manufacturing hub of the world, you could make a phone call and set up a company in China to make phones for you. You know, that's what Micromax did, right? So there was no Micromax earlier, isn't it? Today you have Micromax, nothing like anything. And you have your lavas and your spices and your OnePlus and your, what else? Oppo Goppo, and then Gioni Gaioni, and Xiaomi, Vivo. I mean, all of these vendors never even existed just 10 years ago. Guys, it's an amazing movie to be made actually. You know, a documentary of how people's lives can change, businesses can change, the world can get impacted in just one 10-year cycle, right? Nothing has impacted us as much as this ever in the history of humankind, right? Anyway, so clearly new hardware vendors came, and anyway developers started working freely, and who suddenly started controlling the entire market became your user. So users now control the market, and that is the history, isn't it? So who really played a big role in this is actually Android. iPhone started the transformation, but who took it forward leaps and bounds is Android. Why? Because Android came up with a philosophy which is democratic in nature. So we know where is Android today. We know how Android evolved in the last 10 years at a very high level, and we understand the different players as to how they function today as well. The user controls everything, isn't it? And that's why we have amazing adoption of technology and progress that is being made both in the service circles, service vendors, your OEMs, as well as the developers. Now, knowing all of this, what we want to understand or answer as a question which we started off with is, what is Android now? So today, what is Android? As rightly said, Android is all of the things you said, but more specifically to say what is Android is an open source software development stack, right? And Android, what is Android today is an open source software development stack to build intelligent apps for embedded devices, right? Not just for phones anymore, because as we very well know, Android has now made its road increasingly. It has gone into your different types of embedded devices as well. Having said that, very quickly I want to talk to you about this and then focus on how we are going to do this course, what do we cover, what do we not, what is the end goal and everything else, right? So first and foremost, what is Android is? It is an open source software development stack. So that's the key thing. Why? How can something which was released just a decade ago become so ubiquitous and used across the world is mainly because it is open source. And the second thing is it is free, right? When Chrome was released, I don't know if you have gone into, you should go into reading about how disruptions happen in the marketplace, right? So when there is already somebody who is well established, how is it an underdog can come and disrupt the market and become number one? It seems almost impossible, and yet it happens every decade. Every decade, some or the other company and some set of companies come and they disrupt the existing market leaders. And it's always a fantastic study to go into and to understand how that is possible. Because in our own ways, we are also disruptors. We have to disrupt the people who are there in the industry for us to kind of replace them, right? And somebody else will try to disrupt us later. And that's what is happening to the Indian industry today, that many of the senior people are getting a little shaky because the younger guys are kind of disrupting and with the newer technology trends that they are learning, etc., and taking over their jobs, so to say. Although it's a little exaggerated, if you will, but there is some amount of truth to it. Having said that, Google Chrome. When was Google Chrome released? Approximately 2010, right? So 2010, 2011 is when Google Chrome, I don't know the exact year as well, but somewhere in that effect, right? Which was the number one, your browser, Internet Explorer, and your Netscape, Mozilla, Netscape, which had graduated to become Mozilla, right? So they were the number one browsers in the world. In fact, when Google, one of the team, take a guess who headed this team, who came up with Chrome? Yes. Sundar Pichai, right? So when he created, when he was heading this team and he showed a demo to your Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and they said, let's make a browser which is super fast and lightweight, and which everybody will love using. Within Google itself, people were vehemently opposed to it, because there are already, browsers have been used for several times already. Many browsers are there, couple of them ruling the roost, and why to try to become a third player now? Today, Chrome is the number one software browser that is used across the world, right? So again, what I want to tell you is, there is a learning to be had by looking at how these trendsetters, how these disruptors disrupt an existing marketplace. It's an important thing to study and take learnings personally as well. So Android did the same thing. What did they do? They first open sourced their software development stack, and second, they made it free. So they started going to all the vendors, OEMs, and they said, look, use our open software development stack and implement it on your hardware and just sell it. More customers will buy because this OS is more superior, and you have a smartphone ecosystem already implemented in place. And literally, there were about 23 companies that formed an alliance. Anybody knows what the alliance name is? No, it's called OHA, right? Open Handset Alliance. That was created by Google. About 23 vendors came in, and they all said, we will use Android. I mean, think about it. How can something new, even if it is good, be adopted by all the companies, all the people, all the businesses in the world? It's very difficult, but that's exactly what has happened today, isn't it? So Android is a fantastic case study to understand how disruptions can happen. Anyway, so these guys went there and they said, adopt our Android, we give you the OS, and not only the OS, with the application development framework and whatnot, so that everybody, it becomes easier for you to build phones and sell them to the customers. But now, let's understand this. So what does this Android contain, right? Well, when Andy Rubin built this company called Android, and they wanted to come up with the new age, OS for smartphones, they had to literally start from zero. Building an OS typically takes about 2 million man years, right? 2 million man years. That basically means that no company can ever build the OS starting from now. It's almost an impossible achievement. Again, which is the OS that was released in the world, which has taken over the world by storm, which was again an underdog, which came in at third and is now number one, is which one? Which is the OS, which doesn't even belong to any one company as such. Which is the OS? Windows. Hillary. Not Windows, come on. Linux, guys. Linux. Linux is the number one OS in the world, hands down. No Kidkey, no Windows, no Apple, Fruit, Orange, nothing comes close. All servers in the world today run on Linux. If you buy a server on Windows, people will laugh at you and start throwing eggs at you. Okay? Just 15 years ago, that was not the case, right? And again, in the last 15 years, in the last decade, the entire server market has flipped on its place, right? Earlier, it was all Windows servers and whatnot, and today it's a no-brainer that all servers run on Linux boxes, right? And who owns Linux? Who created Linux? General knowledge. No, open source fine, but who created them? Somebody has to moot it, no? Linux. Usually all these people who create things have a habit of naming what they create with their own name. Yes, Linus Torvalds, right? Linus Torvalds is the one who created Linux. Of course, he did not create Linux from scratch. He took in major portions from Unix, right? The most stable OS in the world. And he took it, but he made it personal computing enabled. Unix was mainly for your, networks, and he made it for PC. Anyway, and he open sourced it. And people like you and me started contributing, and Linux is the biggest open source movement in the world. Literally, more number of developers have contributed to Linux than anything else in the world. And they all contributed free of cost, their time, their intelligence, and their experience per se. Bottom line, when Android had to be started by Andy Rubin, he had to decide what OS should power these Android phones. Clearly, what should be the capability of the OS? One, the OS should be extremely stable. Because when you're looking at a mobile phone, I mean, think about it. If you have mobile phones which are like the earlier Windows, etc., you click on a button and you get green screen or blue screen. I mean, you want to make a call and suddenly a phone crashes. That is not going to be acceptable. So the number one trait of a OS for a mobile system is that it should be stable, reliable. And that's the number one requirement. Second requirement is the OS should give an ability to connect all types of hardware, isn't it? And third, what should be its capability is it should regulate the use of power, because the one thing all of us have less of is battery, isn't it? Most of us are worrying about battery all the time rather than anything else. So the OS should regulate the power. So clearly, and most importantly, it should give the ability for the user to run apps, programs. How many programs? Any number of programs. So multiprocessing became a hallmark requirement for the OS. So Andy Rubin had to decide, should they have to build an OS or should they have to do what? Thankfully, at that point in time, Linux has become ubiquitous and super popular. So what is this stack consisting are of a number of layers. The bottommost layer is formed by your hardware, the actual hardware that the OEM vendor creates, where you have your cameras and your all your sensors, you have your RAM, you have your all the speakers, the cards, SD cards, and so on and so forth, right? All the hardware which is at the lowest level. But now, who manages the hardware for us and exposes its services atop to the top layers is nothing but your OS. And what OS powers your, is the heart of your Android platform, Android stack, is your Linux OS, right? So Android is nothing but a flavor of Linux, right? So what did Andy Rubin do? Is since Linux was open source, he took the major portions of the Linux operating systems, which was a necessity for the mobile platform, and he built wrappers over it, right? So at the heart of your Android ecosystem lies your Linux OS. That means what automatically got ticked now? What automatically got taken care of? One is your stability and reliability already taken care of, because Linux OS is known to be super stable and super reliable, which is the reason why they are used in servers all across the board today. Second thing is, what did he add on? He added on certain things, right? Like one of the things that was added was power management, right? Power management. The other thing that was added on was the ability to add dynamically drivers. What are these drivers? Obviously, we should utilize all these hardwares and sensors that are there, isn't it? How do you communicate with all the hardwares that are there is via drivers. So these drivers exposes the hardware functionality to the above layers, so to say. So power management, and because we used Linux, what automatically became available for us is memory management and process management, right? So automatically Linux has a super capable multitasking system which is implemented, which basically means multiprocessing got enabled free of cost. So look at the beauty of how this Android was created. He simply took what was already available and took the most important parts, added a couple of things on top of it, and suddenly what